serious, has anyone ever tried to intentionally kill you? In elementary school my best friend came to school with a gun to shoot me first then everyone else. I was on family vacation and he got caught with a gun while looking for me at school. Didn't know until a few years later. I was walking around Houston late at night with a friend after my prom. We were having a good time and talking about high school since we were so close to being done. We round the corner to get back to his house and two guys come up out of nowhere demand our wallets. I had left mine at the house as to not lose it. My friend had his. The two guys shot me in the chest and fled. After that the ambulance was called and the last thing I remember was throwing up an enormous amount of blood at the hospital. I was in a medically induced coma for about a week then woke up and was fine. With the worst input it was the best output. My school supported me, people constantly prayed for me, and I was on the upswing. The thing that really bothered me, and continues to bother me to this day, is thinking about how one person could consciously decide to take my life over a wallet. It was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but now I'm in college, and on the diving team. So eat that suckers. Yes, my ex-wife, about a year and a half ago. We were married at the time, and she was having an affair, had just taken out additional life insurance on me, and sabotaged my motorcycle before I had to take a long 100+ mile trip on it for work. Thankfully she failed at it, and I discovered what she had done once I returned home. Had she turned those 2 bolts a simple quarter turn more I would have been highway paced instead of sitting here at work playing on Reddit. She all but admitted to it a few weeks later, and I found out not too long ago that she also tried her damnedest at the time to convince our oldest son that the family would be better off if I were to die. Went to pick up a girlfriend at her house. Her dad didn't like me around, so I decided to wait at a nearby soccer field. Sat in my car with the windows down and started to light a cigarette. Van pulls up next to me about a parking spot away. Cusses at me and asks me what set I claim. I say nothing. Guy from backseat reaches out the driver's window, says F you and starts shooting. My ears popped. Things felt in slow motion. Heard tires screeching and picked up my head to see people running or speeding off in their car. I was calm, cigarette in my mouth not lit. I turn my car on, leave the parking lot, and once I reached the main street I started to shake. Called my girl and told her what happened, still not knowing if I got hit. I get there, she is outside waiting for me. I get out the car and ask her to check me. I was not hit, but the side of my car was shot up. Yes, we had a crazy old woman in my apartment complex. She had it in her head that I and a few of my friends were some kind of bad guys. I don't know why. To my knowledge none of us had never touched her, her stuff, or even exchanged 3 words with her. Every once in a while she'd see me and yell at me, mostly incoherent rambling. One day I was walking out in one of the parking areas. It was a nice day and lots of people were out, so the parking area was really sparse. I heard a car engine being gunned, and, sure enough, I saw this woman barreling toward me in an old sedan, engine roaring. I ran behind a utility pole at the edge of the parking area. She clipped the pole hard and ran right into a corner of a garage. The police and paramedics came out and they took her away. I never saw her again. I don't think he was intending to kill me, but I had a kid hold a gun to my head at a party because his girlfriend was sitting on my lap. A lot of people were sitting outside around a fire, and I was sitting next to this girl. This other girl comes up and starts talking to her and ends up plopping down on my leg. If I were a horse, you'd say she was sitting side saddle. I didn't think nothing of it and pretty much ignored her. Not much later, I was walking around the house to take a pee when her boyfriend was walking past and stops me and says he needs to talk to me. He wasn't a friend, but we've crossed paths before. I didn't think anything of it. We kinda go around the side of the house and he pulls a semi-auto handgun out from behind his back and holds it like a wannabe gangster. Hard to describe, but it was up at his head level, sideways, about a foot from his head, aimed at my head. I was pretty drunk and told him to chill out. No need to be pulling guns out. We are having a party. We are all here to have fun, etc etc. He says he doesn't want me messing with his girl. I try to explain to him that she just sat on my leg and I wasn't even talking to her, but he wanted to make his point, so I'll let him. He tucked the gun into his waistband and covered it with his jacket and walked away. As I was walking back to the fire, one of his buddies gets in my way and starts talking smack about me messing with his friend's girl. I don't think he finished his sentence before my friend's friend, who is a big, fearless kinda guy, punched him square in the mouth. And then he turned to Gun Kid, who was a few feet away, and said something like, "If you pull that gun out, I'm going to make you eat it." A few other non-violent types started suggesting that Gun Kid and his buddy should probably leave, and they did. But not after making a big spectacle of themselves once they were a safe distance away, talking smack, and Gun Kid was pulling his jacket up so we could see the handle of his gun. I found out the next day that Gun Kid ended up going to jail that night. He was in the parking lot of a 7-Eleven, showing off by lifting his jacket, and the cops saw it. I guess the cop drew his gun on the kid, and a bunch of squad cars showed up, and it turned into a big spectacle. The kid got a year and a day in state prison. It's kinda surreal. Yes. Well, kinda. I've had a gun to the back of my head. I was 16. I had a GF named Christy. I wanted to do something fun and funny for her birthday. As I had a key to her car, my plan was to sneak out, pick up a mutual friend, and decorate her car inside and out so she'd see it in the morning before school. This was around 1994. It's about midnight, and I sneak out and drive to my friend's house. I see his light is off, but he's instructed me to wake him up by tapping on the window. I'm dressed in a blue hoodie with the hood over my head. I start tapping, first lightly, then a little harder. Next thing I know, I hear a get down on the ground. I turn to my right, and his dad, who is a Pasadena, TX, police officer, is running at me, gun drawn. Can't figure out who I'm because of the hood. I put my hands up. He turns me around, throws me to the ground, puts the gun to the back of my head, starts asking questions about his kids, his family, his house, turns me over, and realizes I'm his son's close friend. Almost starts crying because he nearly shot me, as I clearly looked like some thug in dark clothing trying to get in house. I was 16 at the time, so I was invincible. Grateful he didn't shoot me. Yep. Here's the story as I've posted it before. I have posted it before in the Reddit long ago of last year, but my best friend snapped and attempted to kill me. We had hung out 2 weeks previously. Then I get an email. In it, he denounces me as a betrayer. He uses rape as a metaphor for how I used him. He trash talks my other friends. And this is only 2 weeks since the last time we hung out and got along fine. He tells me to see a doctor. I'm confused and ask what he's talking about, and he tells me to go read contemporary American short stories. The cast reminds me of a woman he knew whose name had those letters, whom I had never met and never communicated with. Both her initials and mine are CDR/CMD, both of which could be seen as see a doctor. Then he proceeds to tell me that one time, when we went to Subway to eat, I communicated with him via subtext that I wanted him to put down his old chocolate lab. How did I do this? First, because we went to Subway, which meant I was speaking to him in subtext. Also that it was negative subtext, because it was eating away at him. Subway. I asked him to go grab my wallet in the car because I had forgotten it, and he interpreted this as me telling him to fetch, which meant I was putting him down like a dog, which correlated to me telling him he needed to put his dog down. After many emails back and forth trying to figure things out or make up with him, I give up and don't hear from him for months. Then at the end of April, there's a knock on the door, and there he is, wearing a tool belt with a claw hammer on it, claiming the landlord had hired him to fix some broken trim. I don't think we have broken trim, but at the very least thought this was an attempt to reconcile with me via talking, and that this was a ploy to see me. I'll let him in, and we go upstairs to the kitchen. I lived with a roommate in a B-level apartment. Kitchen was upstairs and roommate's room was back a short hallway attached to the kitchen. I go back to ask my roommate if he's aware of any broken trim. He shakes his head no, and I head back to the kitchen. I get there and am immediately hit in the back with the claw hammer twice. Once with the claws, the other with the head. I back up against the counter and the guy's waving the hammer in front of me. I start yelling for my roommate to get out here, and eventually he comes out to see the scene. The guy's demanding that I kneel on the ground, I assume for the coup de grace blow with the hammer. He is spouting about how he already called the cops on himself telling me I'm a child abuser, amongst other renting. My roommate, bless him, somehow talked the hammer out of the guy's hands after I had been punched and started to bleed all over myself. I took that opportunity to run to my roommate's room and try to lock the door so I could use the other door in his room to get outside and circle around to the landlord's place to get help. The guy barreled through the door I was trying to lock. Seriously, he broke the door into two and then started trying to choke me. My roommate dials 911 but has to come back and try to pull the guy off of me. We struggle back up the hallway to the kitchen. We break the walls in the process and I'm still bleeding everywhere. I get loose for a moment and dash down the steps, out the front door, then over to the landlord's door. He was next door. I open his door without knocking, and just as I'm stepping inside, the guy is there, choking me out from behind, again. I look to the landlord for help, and he goes and grabs his gun, which makes the guy back off of me. My roommate stands between the guy and myself, while the landlord goes into my apartment to look at the damage. The guy's telling me that someday I will be trapped in a storage unit being tossed food like an animal, that I'm a child abuser. He tells the landlord that the landlord is harboring a child molester. He's pacing as he's saying this, exactly like a caged big cat, with the same feeling of menace. Meanwhile, the landlord has seen the damage to his apartment unit and comes tearing back outside yelling at the guy who attacked me, telling him to throw a punch now that he doesn't have his hammer. The guy's basically pushed off of the property from the force of the landlord's anger, but not before he had the audacity to ask for his hammer back, which my roommate laughingly refused. It being evidence and all. The guy tells the landlord where the cops could find him and walks home. The cops find him exactly where he said he'd be. The aftermath is that I have an aching back for a few weeks, but with no permanent damage. He is convicted of aggravated assault and goes to jail. I spoke with his dad after the sentencing hearing and found out that his dad had found the guy sitting in his room talking to himself or giggling at things no one else could hear. He also sat in his front yard for 24 full hours, supposedly waiting for me to come hurt him. When I didn't oblige, he came to get me. Looking back at all of the signs before and after his snap, I suspect that paranoid schizophrenia manifested in him. I hope he gets the meds he needs, since he's sick. And as someone I really cared about, I hope he gets better, but I don't think I could ever trust him again.